The Hale-Moore wedding was the event of the year, the kind of ceremony that made the front pages before it even began. Billionaire Charles Hale, the cold, commanding CEO of Hale Enterprises, was set to marry Arabella Moore, daughter of the powerful industrialist, Mr. Moore. It wasn't love, it was strategy, a merger between two empires disguised as a union between hearts. Charles stood before a mirror in his suite, adjusting his cufflinks with surgical precision. His reflection was flawless, just like the plan. After the vows, the papers get signed, he murmured to his assistant. Let's make sure nothing delays this. His tone left no room for sentiment. It wasn't love he was marrying into, it was power. But on the other side of the hotel, panic was unraveling like lace. Arabella Moore, the bride herself, had vanished. Her bridesmaids stood frozen in the suite, phones pressed to their ears, faces pale with horror. She ran away, one of them whispered. She left with Nathan. She said she can't marry a stranger. Mr. Moore arrived moments later, expecting to walk his daughter down the aisle, bouquet in hand, tapping his foot impatiently, only to find chaos. His jaw tightened, fury replacing disbelief. What do you mean she's gone? He snapped. Do you understand what's at stake? Find her. Now. His voice roared. The merger depended on this marriage. The Moore's reputation depended on this wedding happening. Today. There could be no scandal. No one answered. The veil lay abandoned on the floor. The bride was gone, and with her, the future of his company. On another floor, a woman named Yvonne Sanders pushed her cleaning cart down a long corridor, humming quietly to keep her nerves at bay. Her uniform was faded, her shoes worn thin. Life hadn't been kind to her, but she had learned to smile through it. Behind her skipped her 7-year-old daughter, Lily, a curious little thing with wide brown eyes and an imagination too big for her small world. Mommy, look at all the flowers. Lily whispered, pointing to the decorated hall. Is a princess getting married? Something like that, Yvonne said softly. But don't wander off, sweetheart. This place is too big. But when Yvonne turned to collect fresh towels, the little girl had already slipped away, curiosity leading her straight into the bridal suite. The room glittered with perfume and chaos, makeup scattered, shoes tossed, a white veil glimmering on the floor. Lily stepped closer, eyes sparkling. Mom will look like a princess in this, she whispered to herself, reaching for the veil. It was soft, lighter than air. Giggling, she clutched it to her chest and hurried out. Yvonne nearly jumped when her daughter appeared again, breathless and grinning. Lily, where have you been? She scolded gently. But before she could continue, the little girl stood on tiptoe and draped the veil over her mother's head. See, Mommy? You're so beautiful, Lily said proudly. Just say, I do, okay? Then, laughing, she dashed down the corridor toward the ballroom. Lily, wait, Yvonne called. Before she could remove the veil, a pair of wedding attendants rounded the corner and froze. Miss Moore, one gasped in relief. Oh, thank heavens you're here. What? No, wait, Yvonne began, but the attendants didn't listen. They guided her firmly down the hall. Mr. Moore is waiting for you. He's about to lose his mind. They pushed her through a door into a private lounge, where Mr. Moore stood by the window, tense and furious. He turned sharply, and his eyes narrowed the moment he saw her. That wasn't Arabella. The hair was darker, the posture unsure. Who are you? He demanded, but only to her hearing. Yvonne froze. I'm just a cleaner, sir. There's been a mistake. My daughter. His eyes flicked to the veil still on her head, the staff holding on, the ticking clock. The ceremony was minutes away. What's your name? He asked quietly. Yvonne Sanders, she whispered, gripping her hands. Please, sir, I didn't mean. You have a child? He interrupted. How old? 7, she said, startled. Please, if you'll just let me explain. He turned away, thinking fast. His daughter was gone. The guests were waiting. If the press caught wind of this, everything would crumble. Then his gaze returned to her, young, modest, terrified. A stranger fate had dropped at his feet. You need money, don't you? He asked suddenly. Yvonne blinked. Excuse me? He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Walk down that aisle in Arabella's place. Say the vows. Smile for the cameras. After tonight, I'll make sure you never struggle again." Yvonne's mouth fell open. "What? No, I can't do that. I'm not your daughter. I'd be lying to everyone." "You'd be saving your daughter's future," he said sharply. "Do this, and I'll pay your debts, your rent, your child's education. Refuse, and I'll make sure this mistake costs you more than you can afford." His tone left no doubt. This wasn't a request. It was a command wrapped in desperation. Yvonne's throat tightened. She thought of Lily, her school bills from last winter, her little shoes too small now, her laugh when she called her a princess. Slowly, her resolve broke. "Will anyone get hurt?" she whispered. "No," he said. "No one needs to know." He signaled to the attendants. "Prepare her." The women hurried forward, guiding Yvonne into the adjoining suite. They slipped her into Arabella's abandoned gown, a masterpiece of silk and lace that shimmered under the light. She stood before the mirror, a stranger in her own skin. The veil framed her trembling face, turning her into someone else entirely. When she emerged again, Mr. Moore's expression softened slightly. "You'll do," he said simply, offering his arm. "Just keep your head down and repeat what the priest says." The grand doors opened. The orchestra swelled. Hundreds of guests rose to their feet. Yvonne's heart pounded so hard she could hear it echoing in her ears. As she stepped into the ballroom, the crowd gasped at the bride's beauty, unaware she was not the woman they'd come to see. Charles Hale stood at the altar, tall, immaculate, unreadable. When he saw her approaching, something in his gaze flickered, curiosity, perhaps, or confusion, but it passed quickly. "You're late," he murmured when she reached him. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "You look different from your pictures," he said, almost to himself. Her lips trembled. "People change." The priest's voice rose, echoing through the hall. "Do you, Charles Hale, take this woman?" The words blurred together. Yvonne's mind swirled. She heard herself saying, "I do," though her lips barely moved. The ring slid onto her finger. Applause erupted. Cameras flashed like lightning. When Charles leaned in to kiss her cheek, her breath caught. His scent, his warmth, the soft brush of skin that sealed a deal built on lies. Mr. Moore exhaled in relief. The merger was saved. The scandal buried. Later, amid the celebration, Yvonne sat in silence, watching the world toast to a wedding built on deceit. Across the room, Lily peeked from behind a pillar, beaming proudly. "Mommy really is a princess," she whispered. Yvonne forced a trembling smile. She had done it, for her daughter. Charles turned to her, offering his arm. "Mrs. Hale," he said formally. "Shall we greet our guests?" Her heart skipped. The name felt foreign, heavy, dangerous. She placed her hand in his and rose. Flashes went off again, capturing the perfect picture, the billionaire and his radiant bride. No one in that room knew the truth. The real Arabella Moore was gone. And the woman standing beside Charles Hale was never meant to wear that ring. The morning after the wedding dawned soft and golden over the Hale estate. The mansion's corridors still hummed with echoes of laughter and clinking glasses from the night before. Yvonne woke to sheets that smelled faintly of roses and power, the scent of a life that wasn't hers. The diamond on her finger glinted accusingly in the morning light. Across the bed, little Lily slept curled beneath a duvet far too expensive for them both. She rose quietly, heart thudding as fragments of last night returned. Mr. Moore's desperate whisper, his promise of money, the ceremony she hadn't truly understood until she was standing before Charles Hale, a stranger she was made to call husband. Downstairs, the house stirred. Charles had been busy late into the night, entertaining a handful of influential guests and the Moores who'd followed them home after the wedding. He had seen a small girl Mrs. Moore had kept close beside her, but hadn't noticed that Yvonne and the child had been ushered to a room when the crowd thinned. Now, in the clear light of morning, he stepped into the corridor just as a child's laughter echoed from the sitting room. "Lily," Yvonne hissed softly, "don't run." Charles paused at the doorway. A tiny girl in pink pajamas was spinning on the rug, her curls wild, her giggle bright enough to fill the mansion. His brow furrowed. "You have a child?" Yvonne froze. Yes, she said after a beat. Her name is Lily. I hope that's not a problem. He regarded her for a long moment. His voice, when it came, was controlled. Of course not. I just didn't know. He turned away before she could respond. Breakfast will be ready in 20 minutes, he said and left. Ivan exhaled shakily. This was only temporary. 1 month, until the Moores secured their business merger. Then she'd disappear with the money, enough to build a small, honest life. Days passed in an uneasy rhythm. To the outside world, they were the perfect couple. The billionaire and his demure new wife, photographed at charity dinners and company luncheons. Inside the mansion, it was a play of careful distance. Ivan moved softly through rooms she still felt unworthy to enter. She tended to Lily, spoke politely to the staff, smiled on command when the Moores visited. Each time Mr. Moore pressed a new envelope into her hand, she reminded herself this was temporary. 1 month, she told herself, just until the merger is sealed. Mrs. Moore, however, seemed genuinely fond of her. You're different, Arabella, she said one afternoon over tea, watching Ivan help Lily with her juice. Softer, more grounded. Marriage suits you. Ivan forced a small smile. Maybe it changes people. Mrs. Moore's gaze softened, though her husband's eyes across the table remained sharp. Keep playing your part, he warned quietly as they left. If Charles suspects, everything collapses. Ivan's stomach twisted with guilt. She was lying to a man she'd barely met, living under his roof, raising her child among strangers. And yet, she couldn't deny that something about Charles unsettled her in ways she couldn't explain. His quietness, the way he looked at her sometimes, not with affection, but with an unreadable searching. One evening, Lily was playing in the garden when Charles returned from work earlier than usual. He stood by the veranda, watching her chase butterflies, her laughter carrying across the manicured lawn. When she tripped on the grass, he instinctively moved forward to help. Easy, he said, steadying her. You all right? Lily grinned up at him. I'm fine. Look what I caught. She opened her small hands to show an imaginary butterfly, her eyes gleaming with mischief. He chuckled, a sound even he didn't recognize. You're quite the little explorer. As she dusted herself off, the sleeve of her sundress slipped from her shoulder. There, on her skin, he saw it, a faint, flame-shaped mark just below the collarbone. His breath stilled. He had one exactly like it. His father, too, and his grandfather before him. Where did you get that? He asked, voice careful. What? That mark. Oh. She shrugged cheerfully. Mom says I was born with it, like a secret badge. He smiled, though his pulse quickened. A secret badge, he murmured. When Ivan appeared, calling from the porch, Lily ran to her mother. Charles stood watching them both. The little girl's giggle, the gentle way Ivan tucked the dress strap back over her shoulder. Something inside him shifted, uneasy and electric. That night, long after everyone had gone to bed, he sat in his study staring at an old photograph of his family. His father's words echoed faintly in memory, "The Hale mark runs true. It's in our blood." He tried to reason with himself. Coincidence. It had to be a coincidence. Yet something about that child, her eyes, her laughter, refused to leave his mind. In his younger years, Charles had led a different kind of life, a controlled chaos. Women came and went, chosen with precision and forgotten just as quickly. No names, no attachments. Masks, always masks, to keep desire impersonal and safe. He called it discipline. In truth, it was fear of entanglement. But as he lay awake that night, watching the flicker of city lights across the ceiling, his mind drifted to those faceless encounters. Reckless, distant, untraceable. Any one of them could have left behind a consequence he'd never known. The thought made his stomach twist. He needed to know. The next day, he approached Ivan in the drawing room. Lily was outside painting under the gardener's watchful eye. "Ivan," he began slowly, choosing his words, "your daughter, may I ask, where's her father?" She froze, caught off guard. "Her father? Just, if you don't mind telling me." Her fingers fidgeted with her skirt. I don't know who he is. His brow creased. You don't know? Her eyes dropped to the floor. It was years ago. I was desperate. I met a man. I never saw his face. He insisted on masks. Said it was better that way. For a moment, Charles said nothing. His pulse pounded in his ears, but his face remained still, unreadable. I see, he murmured finally. That must have been difficult. She nodded, her voice small. It was my mistake and I've paid for it every day since. But I wouldn't change Lily for the world. He studied her face quietly, not with judgment, but with something far deeper. Then he gave a brief nod and turned away. Thank you for telling me. That night, when Yvonne and Lily were asleep, Charles sealed a strand of the little girl's hair in an envelope and sent it for private analysis. Days passed. On the surface, nothing changed. He remained distant, polite. But inside, he was unraveling, haunted by the truth he both feared and needed. When the results finally came, he locked himself in his study and unfolded the letter. DNA match confirmed. Probability of paternity, 99.98%. He stared at the words until they blurred. His hands trembled. Lily, his daughter. It couldn't be. Yet it was. He stared at the window until dawn, the city glittering far below. And the cold CO, who for once never feel guilty, felt something dangerously close to guilt. Later that night, as he passed by their room door, he saw them asleep together, Yvonne and Lily, a quiet picture of warmth he'd never known. He stood in the doorway, the DNA results heavy in his hand. The truth had come home to him, not with scandal, but with innocence. And for the first time in his carefully constructed life, Charles Hale didn't know what to do. The next morning at breakfast, Lily climbed onto the chair beside him, proudly showing a crayon drawing. Look, Mr. Hale, that's you, Mommy, and me. He looked at the smiling stick figures, the tallest one with hair black like his, the smallest with her mother's eyes. His throat tightened. It's beautiful, he said softly. Across the table, Yvonne smiled uncertainly. She's taken quite a liking to you. And I to her, he admitted quietly. Their gazes met, brief, weighted, electric. Then he stood. I'll be late tonight. When he left, the silence he left behind felt heavier than before. Yvonne watched him go, her heart confusing itself between guilt and something gentler she dared not name. At night, as she tucked Lily into bed, the girl whispered drowsily, "He's nice. I wish he'd be my dad." Yvonne smiled faintly, brushing a curl from her daughter's cheek. "Sleep, sweetheart," she whispered. In the hallway, Charles stood motionless, having overheard her words. The paper with the DNA results felt like fire in his pocket. He looked toward the child sleeping peacefully and the woman sitting beside her. The woman fate had returned to his life without either of them knowing. Rushing to his study, he sank into the chair, memories flooding. Flashes of women behind silk masks, laughter in dim light, a life he had thought buried under years of order and success. Now it had caught up with him, wearing the face of the woman he'd married under false pretenses and the eyes of a child who wished he'd be her father. For days after the DNA results arrived, Charles carried the truth like a burning coal inside him. Lily was his daughter. The thought alone reshaped everything he believed he understood about control, about consequence, about himself. Each morning, he found himself pausing by the breakfast table, watching Yvonne butter toast for Lily, their laughter soft and ordinary. Each night, he lingered by their door, listening to faint bedtime stories and giggles that drifted through the half-open frame. They looked like a family, his family, and yet they didn't know it. He told no one, not even his assistant. Not yet. He needed to be sure, not of science, but of memory. He found Yvonne the next morning in the library, helping Lily pick a book. The sunlight caught her hair, turning the strands gold. She smiled at him politely, still shy around her new husband. "Lily, why don't you take that one outside?" he said. His voice was steady, but his chest ached with nerves. When the girl skipped away, he turned to Yvonne. "I need to ask you something." Her hands stilled on the table. "All right. About Lily's father." She froze. "We've talked about this." "I know, but I want to understand." His tone softened. You said you never saw his face? Her eyes flickered down. Yes, it was one night. He wanted it that way. Wanted what that way? The mess. The secrecy. I was desperate. My father was dying. I didn't have a choice. Her voice wavered, tears threatening. He paid for the surgery. That's all I know. I never saw him again. Charles's throat tightened. He wanted to reach for her, to apologize, to confess, but the words wouldn't form. Instead, he said quietly, I'm sorry you had to go through that. Yvonne blinked, startled by the gentleness in his tone. Thank you. He stood there a moment longer, torn between truth and silence. Then he simply nodded and walked away, before his restraint shattered. Charles couldn't sleep at night. He wandered the halls, passing portraits of Hale's long gone, men who had built empires and broken hearts with the same precision. He wondered what they would think of him now. The billionaire who'd bought control his entire life, only to lose it to a woman he'd once used and a child he didn't know existed. By dawn, he made his decision. She deserved to know. He found Yvonne in the garden, trimming roses while Lily played nearby. His voice was low, almost trembling. Bella, there's something I need to tell you. She turned, surprised by the seriousness in his tone. What is it? He hesitated, a man standing on the edge of his own undoing. Lily's father, he began slowly. You didn't know who I was, because I made sure no one could. Her shears fell from her hand. What? He exhaled shakily, eyes dark with regret. 7 years ago, the gala. You came to me through a private arrangement. Masks, no names. You needed money. His voice broke. I was that man. Yvonne staggered back a step. No, I didn't know it was you, he said quickly. Not until now. I swear I didn't. Her face crumpled with disbelief, tears filling her eyes. So all this time you were the one who... He moved closer. Bella, please. She shook her head. This is too much. But before either could say more, a scream pierced the air. Mommy! They both turned. Lily stood by the garden table, clutching her throat. A small slice of pastry lay beside her plate. Arabella! Charles shouted as she rushed to her daughter. What happened? She's allergic. Nuts. Charles's heart stopped. He'd brought the dessert home himself that afternoon, a gift from one of his chefs. Call the doctor, he yelled to the staff, scooping Lily into his arms. Yvonne gasped suddenly, coughing, her own throat tightening as the same allergy seized her. Within minutes, both were rushed to the hospital. Hours later, Charles sat in the sterile glow of the emergency ward, Lily asleep beside her mother. Monitors beeped softly. The doctor assured him they'd both recover, but the guilt nearly crushed him. He hadn't just hurt them years ago, he'd almost done it again. When Mrs. Moore arrived after hearing the news, she was shaken. Nuts, they said. Charles nodded weakly. I didn't know. Mrs. Moore's expression shifted, confusion knitting her brow. That's strange. She whispered to herself. What? Charles, who didn't hear what she said, asked. Oh, it's a family thing, she quickly replied. My husband has the same rare allergy, she said slowly, inherited through his father's line. Severe. It's unusual. She looked toward the hospital bed where Yvonne and Lily slept, thinking, for both of them to react that way, the same as him, it can't be coincidence. The thought lodged in her mind, refusing to leave. Later that night, when she returned home, she told her husband everything. They share your allergy, Leonard, she whispered urgently. Both of them. You said it runs only through your bloodline. What if... Mr. Moore went still. The words hit him like a blow. Yvonne, the woman he'd paid to impersonate his daughter. It wasn't possible, was it? He poured himself a drink, staring into the amber liquid as pieces began to shift uneasily in his mind. Don't say a word about this, he muttered to his wife. Not yet. I'll handle it. He made a quiet call later to a private lab, instructing them to run a discreet DNA analysis, comparing his own with Yvonne Sanders'. When he ended the call, he sat in silence, staring into the dark. If his suspicion was right, The lie he built to protect his family might be the very thing that destroyed it. The Moore mansion glowed that night, chandeliers dazzling, champagne glasses clinking, laughter echoing down marble halls. The merger was complete. The two most powerful families in the city were finally united, or so everyone thought. Yvonne stood beside Charles, her smile poised but distant. Across the ballroom, Mr. and Mrs. Moore mingled with guests, but there was tension beneath their elegance. In Mr. Moore's pocket lay a DNA report that had shaken the very foundation of his world. When the grand doors opened, the orchestra's tune faltered. Arabella Moore stepped inside, her eyes rimmed red with guilt. The crowd hushed. "Arabella," Mrs. Moore whispered, nearly dropping her glass. Arabella's voice trembled. "I'm very sorry, Mommy, Daddy. I ran away from my duty, from my family. I thought love meant freedom. But I only brought shame." She turned toward Yvonne, standing silently beside Charles. "I came back to ask forgiveness, and to know who she is. The woman who's been living the life I threw away." Gasps rippled through the hall. Yvonne's heart pounded. Charles's hand tightened around hers, steady but alert. Of course, he knew the secret. He had conducted his research on the lady he had paid handsomely to settle surgery bills years ago, and found she was Yvonne Sanders, not Arabella Moore. He was only waiting for the right time. Mr. Moore stepped forward slowly, the weight of his secret pressing on his chest. "You all deserve to know the truth," he began, voice solemn. "Yvonne Sanders is not an imposter. She is my daughter, the one your mother and I lost 26 years ago in the hospital fire." The room erupted in stunned murmurs. Mrs. Moore gasped, tears flooding her eyes. "No, it can't be." "It is," he said softly, unfolding the DNA report. "The tests confirmed it. The allergy, the records, everything. Yvonne is our blood. She was raised under a new name, never knowing who she truly was." The words sank like thunder. Arabella stared at her father, pale. "Is my sister?" Mr. Moore nodded, his voice breaking. "Yes. The child fate returned to us through the very mistake I made." Mrs. Moore rushed forward, clutching Yvonne in a trembling embrace. "My baby, I thought I'd never see you again." Yvonne's tears fell freely now. "I never meant to lie," she whispered. "I was just trying to protect my daughter." Mrs. Moore cupped her face gently. "You didn't lie, child. You only lived the truth we failed to see." Arabella swallowed hard, her voice shaking. "You didn't steal my place. You filled it. Maybe it was never really mine to keep." The air was thick with emotion, until Charles's voice broke through, calm but commanding. "There's something else," he said, drawing every gaze in the hall. He stepped forward, his hands still linked with Yvonne's. "Since we're tearing down the veils of pretense tonight, it's time everyone knows the whole truth." He looked at Mr. Moore, then at the guests, his tone steady. "Lily isn't just Yvonne's daughter. She's mine." The crowd gasped again, sharper this time, rippling through the hall. Yvonne froze, eyes wide, tears shimmering. She didn't expect to hear him say it publicly. Charles went on, his voice firm but gentle. 7 years ago, before I ever knew the Moores, before this marriage was arranged, I lived a life I'm not proud of. I met Yvonne by chance. Neither of us knew who the other was. That one night gave me the greatest gift I never knew I had." He looked down at Lily, who clung shyly to her mother's gown, her big eyes glistening. "She's the reason I changed. The reason I stopped running from myself." Silence fell, broken only by Mrs. Moore's soft sobs and Mr. Moore's deep, trembling sigh. Yvonne turned toward him, her voice cracking. "Charles." He met her gaze, unwavering. "I was cold, blind, and prideful. But that day at the altar, when I saw you, I didn't just marry the wrong bride. I met the only woman who could have ever been right." Arabella covered her mouth, crying softly. "Then it wasn't a mistake," she whispered. "It was fate." Mr. Moore nodded slowly, emotion thick in his throat. A merger written long before contracts, one signed by blood and grace. Mrs. Moore knelt before Lily, tears streaking her cheeks. "You brought your mother home to us," she said softly, smiling through her sobs. And now you've given us all a reason to begin again. Yvonne's voice trembled as she turned to Charles. I'm sorry, everything started with lies. He brushed her tears gently with his thumb. Then let it end with truth, our truth. The applause began softly, hesitant at first, then swelling as people rose from their seats. The Moores embraced both Charles and Yvonne, and for the first time, two families broken by ambition were bound together by love. Lily beamed between them, her little voice rising above the murmurs. Does this mean we're all family now? Everyone laughed through their tears. Charles knelt, pulling her close. Yes, sweetheart, he said. And this time, no lies. The chandelier lights shimmered, reflecting off tears and smiles alike. As the camera pulled back, the hall glowed with warmth, the sound of laughter, of rebirth, of long-buried truth finally free. Charles's final words lingered. Sometimes fate hides behind the wrong veil, only to reveal the right heart.